Hello and welcome to our 100th episode on the podcast. My name is Alicia. I am joined with Christine Knox and James Crook, my fabulous hosts. And today we're going to be talking all things 100 years. We're going to have a look at 100 podcast episodes. Okay, not all of them, but a bit of a recap. We're going to have a look at where this industry has been over the last 100 years and what might it look like in the next 100 years as well. So, when we first originally began this podcast, it was James's brainchild. James was the one who said, I want to run a podcast. Let's do this, and set it all up. So James, can you share with us what it has been like to create a podcast and what it was like to set up and why? Why did you want to actually do that?
I'd love to. Thanks, Leash. I actually started, it was a few years ago now, and we've had a few sort of seasons, we call them, gaps in between. So it's not like we've been doing them like every week forever. But it was a really fun thing. I studied journalism at uni, so I've had that kind of background of liking to play around, interviewing people and chatting and getting some wisdom that way. And so it seemed a pretty natural way to step into an industry that I've been familiar with, working with for a while, but actually as I was committing into coaching in massage specifically, it's like, well, why don't I just start interviewing people and getting some stories that are out there? And one of the things that did happen quite early on was I noticed that a lot of people, remember this is going back quite a few years now, but a lot of people had quite a negative view or a limited view of what you could actually do with the business side of massage. Lots of people would say it's a great industry to have part-time while I'm having kids, or, it's been good, but I really just find that, I can't charge as much as I want to. So maybe I need to go back and have another job as well, or even instead. And so it kind of like, it had a bit of a vibe. And as I was talking with lots of people, I'm like, you know what, there are actually heaps of massage therapists that make a really good full-time living out of this, overcome all sorts of challenges, and really, really love it. But it's like their stories were not as visible as the ones of people kind of complaining and feeling a bit down about the whole thing. So I thought, well, why not start a podcast where I can do some great interviews with people who are actually finding great success, loving this industry. Maybe they've been in it for a long time, maybe a short time, but who can really just expose some of the brilliant things that happen here. And I've been really grateful to be able to chat with a bunch of different people along the way. So I don't know, I haven't actually added it up, Leash, but I reckon by now, hitting 100, I've probably done about half the episodes. You've probably done the other half. Does that sound about right? Like it's...
Yeah, I think so. I think you might have headed it up for around 3 of the 4 years it's been running or something like that. And I only sort of started maybe 12, 18 months ago, and then Christine has joined us as well. So, I think majority of the episodes, particularly in the early days, would all have been your voice and your interview style. So, Christine, you were one of the first people we interviewed back in the early days when I had a look through our original recordings, and you're probably our most regular guest over multiple seasons, which tells us that she's
That's
brilliant.
exciting.
Exactly. So, Christine, what was it like to be a guest on the podcast?
Oh, it was a bit nerve-wracking at the beginning. It was really like, oh my goodness me, what will I say? But luckily, I like to have a wee chat with people, so it was quite easy probably hard to get me to shut up, actually, I would imagine. And yeah, I had lots of fun. It was great fun and a bit of a laugh, and always always fun to share some stories and things like that. So that's great fun. Yeah, it's good.
You are a great storyteller too. I've listened to many of your podcast interviews while I'm running, and I'm running along, and people probably think that I'm mental because I'm laughing and then crying and then laughing again, because you can spin such a fabulous tale and tell stories so well. And then what's it been like stepping into the interviewee role, actually kind of interviewing other
Being
people?
an
What's that?
interviewer.
That's right. That's
Yes,
the right word. What's it been
yeah.
like?
It's been great. It's been really good fun, and I've enjoyed that aspect of it. I have to be more deliberate in being quiet. So if you've listened to some interviews and I'm really quiet, it's because I'm really trying hard to let the other person tell their story and listen to what they're actually saying instead of thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to ask. So it takes a little bit of a different focus on skills and concentration.
I totally agree. I've actually listened back to podcast episode where I was interviewing someone and I had that listening brain, listening to ask questions and thinking of the tech and making sure it was all working. Listening to the podcast, I'm like, oh, it's a really good podcast. Like, didn't even realize there was so much that had gone on because I was so into the conversation with the person. So, yeah, it is quite different. And thanks for sharing. It's great to have the modalities and the hands-on aspect of what we've been talking about this year and this whole season, really, brought into the podcast. I think it's such a fantastic opportunity for therapists to learn from, and we're getting such incredible feedback from you guys listening in that you're loving that side of things as well. So that's awesome. So cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of our favorite episodes. We've had 99 because this is our 100th one, and obviously we can't pick this as our favorite because we're recording it right now. So for you, James, what would you say? What are some of your top favorite episodes that you have interviewed people over the years?
Well, if I think back to the ones that I've done myself, I really focused my favourites on the people that I remember being a little bit different in the industry or some interesting stories around business and that side of things. And I remember a handful, like Lauren Nicholson. I remember interviewing him. He's legally blind, works a great massage business, and is also like an inspirational speaker. So he was a really good interview, great at speaking, a really good story to be able to share. A couple of people I remember, Tim Nelson and Sandra Ellers. These guys both have very interesting businesses. Tim works in disability massage, Sandra in elderly massage, but they both love what they do. Very unique and heartfelt industries, as well as from a business point of view, they're able to get government funding for a lot of the actual work that they do, which is a little bit of a different side of business for massage, which was really great. I remember Charlie Wilkinson. He's a great talker as well. If you remember his episode, he's the one that got voted best massage in Sydney, and hearing his story about how he made that happen and some of the fairly unique things he does in his massage treatments as well. He does long format massage, which I thought was absolutely fascinating, where he'll massage for 2, 3, even 4 hours, sometimes for one person. So that was super cool. And then the most popular episodes we've had that I've recorded, quite functional, but they're the ones that are about employing employees versus contractors, and how the government might want us to legally employ and what independent contracting must look like and that kind of stuff. I've actually spoken with a couple of different HR people around that, but both of those episodes have been really popular, I think, because they solve a practical question that people have, something that people look up and want to find on podcasts for sure. And so I chose those ones from my interviews, but actually some of yours have been really cool as well, Leash. So I didn't choose any of yours as my faves from my end.
That's fun.
But what about you? What do you reckon are some of your favourite ones?
Well, I think it was the start of 2021 or 2022. I had a really good idea, which is kind of a bit of a saying we have when it's like, oh no, Christine has them too. James is much more, centered and makes a bit more logical sense. Whereas Christine is like, we've got this great idea, let's do it, yay. And I had an idea to run a podcast called Our Power to Choose. So still utilizing the same podcast style that we always have, the same platform, but just have some different episodes. And so rather than them looking at successful strategies that the podcast had always been based on, it was like, what would happen if we took people who had experienced lots of challenges and talked about the way that they got through them, and not so much what was the outcome of that, but who they got to be along the way. So it's based on the Viktor Frankl quote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is an opportunity to choose our response, and that opportunity to choose how we respond. Now, he was an Auschwitz survivor, which I just think is like, there goes my last excuse for any reason, for any, behavior that isn't great, because if he has experienced something like that, it can still have this unbelievable, side of psychology that he created based on his experiences. Then what could we learn from such things? So the first person that I interviewed was Leanne Crocker. She had and is still currently in process of a very large challenge in a building that she was part of, and what has happened in that, and the outcome of that is still to be worked today. what I love about her interview is her ability to step into her own vulnerability, to practice self-care, to be so intentional with how she operates and shows up every single day. And no part of, like, the harder it gets, the more she does those things. The more compressed she feels, the more she does these things. And, I think for me, probably one of my strategies is I'll do all that stuff when it's sorted. Like, once I'm through the challenge, then I'll do the self-care and the extra meditation and the visualizations and stuff. Whereas she just does more of it the harder it gets. And I just loved that interview, and it was like, yeah, this is working. And I think my other favorite interview was with Becca. So I think Leanne was episode 58, and episode 74, I finally let go of my notes and just sort of put them to the side and went, let's just, free flow with this. And we just had this incredible conversation about intuition and what's possible. And it was just so much fun to kind of play there. So they're probably my two favorite episodes that I have recorded so far. And I mean, just so grateful for people that would give up their time in order to be on a podcast and allow us to, share their conversation and their stories. So yeah, they're all my favorites, but those two stand out the most. What about for you, Christine? What would you say, because you were a listener of the podcast as well, what have been some of your favorite episodes?
Well, I was a big fan of it. I used to listen to it pretty much as soon as a new episode came out. I would listen to it because I really enjoyed it. And I'd actually put my earphones in while I was doing my vacuum cleaning and listen to the podcast while I did that, which is kind of weird to now be on the podcast. Favorite episodes? I really like the early ones that James did. Sorry, Leash. But there was one with Petra Manos, where she was had a background in missile detection, and she'd pivoted into the world of SEO. And I was just like, wow, she must be so clever at this. I want to work with her. I want her to do my SEO. I never did get there. I know a few therapists that did actually get in touch with her and get their SEO done by this ex-missile detection lady. Wow, amazing. But like the podcast itself is really cool, like how she explains how the two worlds are very related. And I was like, wow, that's just mind-blowing, really. Pretty cool.
That's so cool. So cool. And it is good to be able to go back on some of the old episodes and just sort of have a look and see what's there. And that's the beautiful thing about podcasts is they don't go away. And I know podcasts that I follow, I'll go back and look at some particular content that I might be researching for something or just wanting to know more about myself. It's like, what did they think 4 years ago? Is it still the same? What did they think 5 years ago? Is it still the same? Or they say something, but it's just a bit different. And yeah, I think as we grow and develop and as other podcasts grow and develop, I think you can hear different flavors sort of throughout the different layers of content.
Yeah.
So, Christine, you are our go-to hands-on specialist when it comes to knowing incredible things about the body and body work. What if we had to ask you, so two questions. One is a little bit about the history of hands-on body work and massage and the last 100 years and where we might be going in the next 100 years. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, I guess most people get taught about the history of massage when they go to study massage. And I kind of immediately kind of go, oh, yeah, Egyptians 3,000 years ago, blah, de, blah. Yeah. And all of these things. I think that's really normal, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, surely. And then, of course, the I can't even remember his name, the Swedish guy who basically invented Swedish massage. Can you remember his name? It was like Henrik or something like that. I can't remember. I'm not very good with massage history. Not really. But I was quite fascinated with the role of massage in the world wars. I found that absolutely fascinating that they had a whole bunch of, well, they were called masseurs, military masseurs. And I was like, well, what did they do? Please make it massagey. And apparently they helped, especially in World War One, they helped the soldiers with things like PTSD, which was a new thing, shell shock. That's what was PTSD. And they helped with things like trench foot, helping with increasing circulation to areas where they just hadn't moved and weren't moving. And, and I just think, gosh, it makes you think about this whole generation of soldiers from all over the world who experienced all these trauma, basically. And it's like, oh, wow, okay. So I kind of really get a bit nerdy about World War One massage therapists. Which is like, anyone else have that same?
I didn't even know that.
You didn't know that? Yeah. Well, I kind of had a feeling about it. And actually, when you look up the records and things, you can actually see all their enlisting, all the massage therapists have actually got like a space, and a lot of them were from France and from the UK. So I was like, wow. And that was really the very start of physiotherapy as we know it today.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. I think it's kind of nerdy cool fact. You go. So, yeah.
And where do you think we're going? Like, what do you think massage will look like in 100 years?
Oh, what will massage look like in 100 years? Oh, my goodness. Well, I asked ChatGTP, what will massage look like in 100 years' time? And they seem to think it would be very robotic, and lots of robotic type tools, including the use of VR headsets, which actually on the weekend when we were away, one of the therapists that is coming and helping us at retreat, Jazz, she had her virtual reality headset with her, and she let us try it out. And it spoke to us and played music and massaged our eyeballs, which was a bit, what? But actually, and had heat, didn't it? It kind of heated up a bit, and it used all the things. So it was like, oh, wow, that's kind of like a cool, interesting thing to add into treatment. The headset was too big for me. It fell down immediately, and it was too small for James. Which is quite funny.
Maybe in 100 years they'll have better adjustable sizing.
Yeah, maybe it'll just be like auto clamped to your face all the time or something. I don't know. We'll just go around the world, just be massaged the whole time because we're so stressed now. I have no idea. Funny. Also, online consults and treatments and those sorts of things might be something that we actually invest more time and effort and energy into. I'm really hoping in 100 years' time they still have remedial hot stones and scar therapy. Like, really? Come on. And I really hope that they still have that beautiful, caring, listening touch is really what I hope for.
Yeah. That's it, because I think like all the technology in the world is fabulous, but it's still cookie cutter. Yeah, it's still one size fits most. And as we showed, it was designed, on the weekend, it just showed us that it's not all. And you can't have that intuition, that listening touch that says, I just, I've got 5 ways I could treat a headache, and I just sense that you might need a bit of this today. How do I know that? I just do.
Interestingly, I was looking up the future of online shopping, for buying clothes and shoes and things. And they're developing a touch screen where you can feel texture. Wow. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And that's something that maybe massage therapists can really take advantage of in the future. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's still new technology being developed, but I think I read about that a couple of years ago, actually. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. So We'll see where watch this space. Yeah.
That's, yeah, super, super, super interesting.
Mm. How about you, Alicia? What do you think might happen there, or like in the world of coaching, 100 years past, 100 years forward?
Well, yeah, like thinking about this, I was sort of thinking like what happened 100 years ago, and I guess the kind of coaching that we are trained in, that we do, is NLP, which stands for neuro linguistic programming, and that sort of came out in the 1970s. So it's not quite 100 years. I couldn't find much more coaching before that. But essentially, it was developed in the early 70s by Richard Bandler, who was a mathematician and computer scientist, and John Grinder, who was a linguist. So they wanted to understand and model patterns of successful communication and personal development. So that's essentially, what we do now, even today, just looking at how do we find these successful patterns of behavior, looking through the podcast episodes. What are people doing, and how are they communicating, how are they thinking, and what are they outworking in order to create the success? And these guys looked at other people's success and modeled it. So they looked at Fritz Perls, Virginia Satir, Milton Erickson, and about 35 other incredible therapists who got amazing results in different areas of psychotherapy, and looked at, well, what if we took what they did, if we replicate it, do we get the same result? And if we change this and do we get a different result? And if we change this bit, do we get the same or better result? And so they kind of tested and measured this until they discovered and created what we now have as NLP. So I think the more that we learn that, and the more that it gets out, I do sometimes think about knowing the impact that we have had and what people have shared, is that the coaching that we've done with people doesn't just help them in their business. It'll often help them in their families communicate better. And then their kids start to say, hey, mum, hey, dad, there's something that they start thinking a different way. So when I think of the impact of that in 100 years, and think about what would it be like to have some of these skills as a child or as a teenager, that would, I think, make life a heck of a lot easier. So where we'll be in 100 years, I'm not sure, but I imagine that the compound effect of the impact might have a big effect on the way people show up and the way that they get different results in their lives. So, yeah. So, James, we've talked a bit about hands-on bodywork and coaching. What about in marketing? What are some kind of big leaps in marketing and in both in the last 100 years and where we're going in the next 100?
I reckon it's really interesting listening to both of your answers there. A lot of what we're really talking about is the difference between knowledge or information and then the physical world or the intuitive world. And I think what we see at the moment is a trend that education is just so much more readily available. Information, you can just search it on the internet and it pops up. You can ask ChatGPT, and it's only going to get cleverer in the next 100 years. So that idea that we won't know something, or that there'll be some kind of secret information that one person has and everybody else doesn't, I think that's just going to go way down. So it won't be like, I've got to learn some special piece of info. It's more like I've got to learn a special technique, or I've got to be able to connect with someone in a very unique way in order to be able to create better change. And I actually, listening to what both you're saying, I'm thinking that really reflects through to marketing as well. Like if I think back 100 years ago, marketing, obviously very different, technology, completely different. But the basis of it has always been someone wants to sell something or has something that other people might want. And marketing is just kind of like connecting the dots. It's like, oh, do you feel like this? Then yes, I can help. Let's do this. And copywriting, for example, the words that we use to be able to communicate those ideas, maybe it used to be done in newsprint, and then it was on radio and TV, and now it's on the internet, on social media. It's kind of like the same thing is just happening in different formats. And I kind of see the same will happen into the future, right? It's like there'll probably be all sorts of fancy new ways of getting information to people and connecting the dots and communicating with our audience. But the actual idea of what it is we communicate is still going to be one of those things that as humans, we just have to actually do. We have to be there. We have to step into that void and be who we are and connect with people who are at the other end of that, of whatever that connection pipe looks like. So it's, I kind of like, it's fun being in marketing at the moment. There's so much exciting stuff that happens all the time. And I see that as a bit of a trap too, because some people get so excited by the change, or they get so put off by the change, they get scared by it, that either way, they kind of can forget or miss that opportunity to just connect with people that we might want to connect with. And fundamentally, that's what marketing is, right? So it's something that will always be there, humans connecting with other humans, but how we do it might change a lot along the way. And to be honest, I'm not really ready to even guess what that might look like 100 years from now. Like, oh my goodness, thinking back to 100 years ago, marketing just looked so different. The technology was so different. 100 years from now, it could literally just be anything so different from where we even are now. Yeah. But what an exciting future.
And that's what it means to be human, isn't it? Like, we actually do evolve and grow and adapt and change. And even just listening, to the history of this podcast, it's the same thing. It's we are growing and adapting and evolving and behaving differently and adapting to the circumstances and the environment and climate that's out there. And I think that is what resourceful behavior looks like. Like, we have to adapt and grow and change. And hopefully in the next 100th episode, we get our 200th episode, things will have grown and adapted and changed yet again. So it's such a privilege to be able to share this information with you guys and to sit next to the two of you, even though we're in different offices or different states often. It's great to be able to connect in and just share, ideas and thoughts and feelings and beliefs and ideas and memories and wisdom and experience and knowledge. So I want to say a massive thank you to both Christine and to James for sharing their wisdom collectively with me and with you guys listening in today as well. So thank you guys both so much for today.
It is a pleasure. Thanks for having us, Lish.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.